I don't think the issue is so much divisions in the West. The fundamental question is, how did we get into this moment of confrontation? In my view, this is a slow-motion Cuban Missile Crisis. And if you remember, in October 1962, the discussions were, above all, Washington and Moscow. And so the same thing is going on today because, for example, Ukraine, Kiev has had 5 years, Moscow would argue, to implement the Minsk Accords. So France and Germany, as part of the Normandy format, they could have pushed for it more actively. Russia constantly asked them to do so, and they failed to do so. And so Russia feels that its back is to the wall, as it did with the location deployment, of course, of the Jupiter missiles in Turkey in 1962, which, of course, were removed afterwards. So we're, as I say, it's a slow-motion crisis, but it's as serious, with possible disastrous consequences. It's good they're talking, but the talks so far don't seem to be going anywhere. The issue isn't, to the point at which you could say, did Cuba ultimately have a say in 1962? Don't forget that neutrality, one of the fundamental demands of Russia from its documents in December, was to ensure that neutrality was the position of Ukraine for many years. It is a position of Belarus, and it's also the position of certain countries within European Union, Ireland and so on, Austria, Finland. It's not an outrageous one. The talk of a sphere of interest isn't quite the issue, as Blinken put it. It's more, as far as Moscow is concerned, a sphere of security. And as you can imagine, it takes just 5 minutes for a missile to go from Kharkov, the border of Ukraine, to Moscow. So obviously, we want to see Ukraine secure in its borders, sovereign and united. But how to get there isn't... Ukraine, Kiev has had so many years to try to get a peace deal. Zelensky hasn't really pushed to implement even a vague formulation for the Donbass and for sovereignty or autonomy for that region. And so this is why Moscow has escalated the tension to say, look, just listen to our concerns. They've been making these concerns, I might say, known since at least the time of Yeltsin. So it isn't Putin so much. It's one of those fundamental systemic issues, structural issues of where Russia is, and with this perception of NATO, which is far more than just a defensive alliance. They could argue, look at the bombing of Serbia in 1999, involvement in other military activities. So it's actually far more engaged. And so Russia does have these security concerns. Of course, they need to be negotiated. We cannot accept the language of ultimatums, but they have to be taken seriously. Certainly an underestimation of Russia's resolve at this moment in time. It's very unlikely that Russia is going to back down and go away empty-handed. And this is, as you absolutely rightly say, in 1962, there were a lot of back channels. There was a lot of second track and other diplomacy going on. The tragedy today is that there isn't much of this, that we're in a worse and, in fact, possibly a more dangerous position than we were in the first Cold War. Some of us have been warning about this for years. And so, again, I'm not saying that, one accepts Moscow's or Washington's point of view. But what's really quite frightening in all of this is that the European powers haven't really been able to intervene in any constructive manner. As you say, bloc unity has been maintained. But if bloc unity is mistaken, then it doesn't actually serve any fundamental purpose. So when Russia says, you argue, that it wants to divide, well, we're talking about Germany, we're talking about Nord Stream 2, and talking about other countries, all with their concerns and interests. Bloc unity is not always advantageous, because it'd be good to have more dynamic moving parts in the negotiation. Yeah. The term Putin used was military technical. They've absolutely refused to specify what this means. Some people in Moscow have been speculating maybe forces back to Cuba, as it was in 62, forces in Venezuela. I don't think a full-scale invasion of Ukraine is on the cards. Of course, nothing can be excluded. But what we're talking about is possibly long-distance artillery, some bombing and other elements to degrade some of the Ukrainian forces. But it's absolutely, heaven forbid, that we get to that point. As I say, this is a systemic issue which has now finally come to the boil. And, many in Moscow would argue that they've been excessively patient. And again, another contrast, by the way, with 1962 is that at that time they had the Kennedys, Jack and Robert, who were absolutely masterful in diplomacy. And I don't think we can say that about Blinken and Biden, though Biden is engaging, and I think that's quite important. But they simply do not understand Moscow's point of view. And in the West, it's interpreted as blackmail, and that you cannot, indeed, you can never give in to blackmail. But if you look at it in a rather more holistic point of view about the failure of establishing an inclusive post-Cold War peace order in Europe, then we can actually be a bit more creative, I think. And don't forget, Ukraine was committed to neutrality earlier.
By the way,
and so it's not such an outrageous thing. And even the invitation for membership of Ukraine and Georgia in 2008 was opposed by members of George W. Bush's Security Council, National Security Council. So these are not outrageous demands, even though they're now couched as something quite appalling.